You know, when you watch a really good magician, the actual trick almost never happens when there is like a puff of smoke or a sudden flash of light.
Right, yeah. It happens when you aren't paying attention to the right thing.
Exactly. The real trick happens right in front of your face while you are looking directly at it, perfectly hidden in plain sight. It works because the magician understands how to basically hijack your brain's filtering system.
The brain is remarkably efficient, sometimes to a fault, actually. I mean, in any given moment, we are bombarded with millions of sensory inputs, so our neurological hardware has to aggressively edit reality.
Yeah, it has to.
Right, so we only truly perceive what we expect to perceive, and we just discard the rest as background noise.
And that neurological blind spot is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Oh,
Today we're going to unpack a really chilling, meticulously documented case study based on the source text, The Cracked Red Mask under Chandrapur.
it is quite the read.
It's a terrifying look at what happens when the mundane expectations of a crowded village festival become the perfect camouflage for something fundamentally unnatural. If you've ever wondered how an entire community can completely ignore a creeping existential threat standing right in their own village square, well, this is the masterclass.
To really understand the mechanics of this camouflage, we have to look at the environment first. So Chandrapur village during festival season is just a massive sensory overload.
Right.
You have noise, color, celebration, and dozens of strangers passing through. Puppeteers, jugglers, musicians. The village's collective expectation is to see strange, flamboyant performers.
Which creates the ultimate hunting ground. I mean,
Yeah.
a predator doesn't need to hide in the dark woods if it can just adopt the shape of something harmless and stand directly under a street lamp. And that brings us to the catalyst of this entire ordeal.
Yeah.
The disappearance of a 7-year-old boy named Mehul Patel. Mehul vanished on a Thursday evening near this old banyan tree at the edge of the village. And the last time anyone saw him, he was holding a little paper windmill, laughing at a street performer who never spoke a single word.
The primary source material provides a very specific, very unsettling description of this performer. He's a figure wearing a heavy, long black coat, which is unusual for the climate, and a disturbing mask.
A really disturbing mask.
Yeah. The mask is the color of dried blood, and the entire surface is covered in these tiny hairline cracks. But the defining feature, the thing that immediately flags this as an anomaly, is the eyes.
Or the lack of them.
Right. There are no eye holes in the mask. There's only a smooth, black emptiness where human eyes should be.
Okay, let's unpack this because the juxtaposition here is breaking my brain a little bit. We have a figure with no visible means of seeing, performing whimsical street magic.
It's bizarre.
It is. He's pulling paper birds out of his sleeves, making coins vanish into thin air, manipulating these little wooden dolls to dance around his feet. But the source text specifically notes that the physics of his movement are entirely wrong.
Yeah, the witnesses described his movement as frictionless, like too smooth, too light.
Right. If you picture someone doing sleight of hand, there's a weight to their movements, a center of gravity. But this entity doesn't move like a human being rooted to the earth. It moves more like a puppet being dangled from invisible strings from above.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
His feet barely seem to register the ground. It's almost like a dark, inverse reflection of the literal hand puppets he's using to entertain the children. Which begs a huge question, right? If this thing is moving with impossible alien physics, why didn't the adults in the village immediately panic?
Well, this is where we see a fascinating psychological divide, and it really comes down to cognitive dissonance. Children possess minds that are still highly plastic. Their understanding of physics and reality hasn't completely solidified yet, so they're open to magic.
So they just accepted it.
They accepted the performer instantly, yeah. The adults, however, experienced a massive neurological conflict. Their primal survival instincts were screaming that the movement of this creature was biologically impossible. But their rational, socialized brains told them, hey, we're at a festival. This is just a performer doing a routine.
So instead of fleeing or confronting it, they just looked away. They literally edited the threat out of their conscious awareness to resolve that discomfort in their brains.
Exactly.
They rationalized the danger away. I mean, even when Mehul vanished, the police blamed kidnappers from the next town. The older villagers blamed wild animals in the forest.
Rationalization is a powerful defense mechanism, but it shatters the moment you introduce The vanishings didn't stop with Mehul.
No, they didn't.
3 days later, another child disappeared. Then a third. And every single missing child left behind the exact same calling card.
Yeah, and this is the turning point in the text where a 28-year-old local school teacher named Ananya Sharma steps in. She notices what the police completely missed. Every missing child, including one of her own students, a little girl named Ria, had begun obsessively drawing a very specific symbol just days before they vanished.
And the symbol is a circle with 3 straight lines intersecting through the center. When Ananya starts quietly interviewing the remaining children in the village, they all tell her the exact same story.
About the red man.
Right, the red man showed them the shape. He would draw it in the dirt with a long finger while acting out silent stories with his hand puppets. Stories about a place beneath the earth. He communicated to the children that the symbol was, in his words, a door.
A door. That implies like a literal or psychological threshold. We are going to come back to that, but Ananya takes this information and heads to an abandoned local archive near the village temple. And she starts digging through decades of local records, and she uncovers a terrifying historical cycle.
She finds a newspaper clipping from 1946. A traveling carnival came through Chandrapur, several children vanished, and witnesses reported a silent entertainer wearing a cracked red mask.
Wow. 1946.
Yeah, and she pulls another record from 1964, the exact same description. Then again in 1986 during a local fair.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because she finds actual photographs attached to these old files. And she realizes she isn't looking at a lineage of copycat criminals passing down a costume.
No, it's not a legacy thing.
It is the exact same man in every photograph. Identical black coat, identical cracked red mask, zero biological aging across 80 years of documentation. That completely shatters the premise of what we are dealing with. We generally assume a mask is a disguise, right? Something a human wears to hide their identity from witnesses.
Sure, that's the baseline assumption.
But looking at an 80-year timeline, what if the mask isn't a disguise at all? What if it's a structural requirement?
Oh, you mean you're suggesting it functions more like a biological apparatus?
Exactly like a deep-sea diver's pressurized suit. The diver doesn't wear the suit to hide their face from the fish, you know. They wear it because the atmospheric pressure of our world would destroy them otherwise. What if this entity requires the coat and the mask to maintain its physical cohesion in our reality?
That paradigm shift changes the investigation from a criminal pursuit to observing an anomaly. And by actively investigating this anomaly, Ananya triggers a very dangerous ecological mechanism.
How so?
In nature, observing a predator usually means alerting the predator to your presence. The moment you step out of the background noise and focus on them, you become an active participant in their ecosystem.
Which leads to the most visceral escalation in the entire source text. It's 2 a.m. The festival is over. The village is dead silent. Ananya is sitting in her bedroom, and she hears it. A slow, rhythmic tapping on her window glass.
Tap, tap, tap.
Yeah. She pulls back the curtain, and the masked entity is standing directly outside her window.
The description here really highlights the complete lack of human microexpressions or breathing. It is entirely motionless in the dark.
It's so creepy. The moonlight catches the hairline cracks running across the red face. The creature slowly raises one abnormally long, pale finger to the glass, and using something dark and wet, it traces the symbol onto her window. By the time Ananya stumbles backward and catches her breath, the yard is empty.
But the symbol is still there.
Yes, the symbol remains, drawn in blood.
It is a brilliant, horrifying piece of misdirection. The entity is acknowledging her investigation, effectively pinning her to that room in terror, but it's a distraction because the primary objective hasn't changed at all.
Right, because the next morning.
Yeah, the next morning, the village wakes up to find that Rohan, the young son of the local doctor, has been taken from his bed.
Ananya runs to Rohan's house. And inside his bedroom, painted across the wall, is the symbol. But this time, there's an addition. Beneath the circle and intersecting lines, written in a child's shaky crayon handwriting, are 4 words. He lives under us.
And those 4 words radically alter the geometry of the mystery. The threat isn't coming from the deep forest. It isn't an external invader. Ananya realizes she needs to shift her focus from historical records to geographical surveys, so she returns to the archives and uncovers a damaged, forgotten map from the British colonial era.
A map of what?
It details a massive, abandoned water tunnel system built deep beneath Chandrapur.
A system that was abruptly boarded up and sealed decades ago because the local laborers kept disappearing into the dark during construction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings up the deeply unsettling reality of urban infrastructure. Human civilization is essentially a thin, fragile crust floating on top of a deep, dark history of forgotten voids. We build subway systems, sewer lines, and aqueducts, and when they become obsolete, we just pave over them.
You just bury them.
We create these massive, empty subterranean cavities and simply forget they exist.
But nature abhors a vacuum. If you leave a massive, sheltered, unmonitored space under a populated area, something is going to move in and claim it.
Right. And the entity clearly predates the British tunnels by centuries, but it opportunistically parasitized human engineering. It used our own abandoned infrastructure as a pre-built nervous system to move beneath the village undetected. And the most damning detail on that archival map is the main access point. The tunnels converge and rise directly beneath the roots of the old banyan tree.
The exact spot where the silent performer stands every single evening doing magic tricks for the kids.
Yeah.
He hasn't been traveling into the village. He's been standing on his own front porch.
Yeah, it's chilling.
The absolute horror of that realization pushes Ananya past the point of relying on the authorities. She grabs a heavy iron rod and a flashlight, and she walks to the village square in the dead of night.
The text sets a stark, oppressive atmosphere here. The festival stalls are empty. There is no wind, no sound of insects. The performer is waiting for her by the tree. It points a finger downward, and hidden among the massive, winding roots of the banyan tree is a rusted metal hatch, half buried in the dirt.
Ananya demands to know what it is, and for the very first time in 80 years of recorded sightings, the entity speaks. The acoustic description of its voice is incredibly disturbing. The text says it sounded wrong, like multiple wet voices trying to speak in unison from underwater. It just says two words, "Come see."
That auditory detail is crucial, actually. A human voice is produced by a single larynx pushing air. The watery overlapping sound strongly implies a collective consciousness. It's a composite organism attempting to synthesize human speech by layering multiple internal vocalizations.
Wow.
So Ananya follows the entity down the hatch, descending into what is basically a sensory nightmare. The temperature plummets, the air smells of wet earth and rot, and they are surrounded by the decaying brickwork of the colonial tunnels.
And the walls down there are completely covered in that same carved symbol. And as they walk deeper, the psychological pressure really builds. Ananya starts hearing echoes in the dark, soft whispers, the sound of children laughing or crying, bouncing off the brick walls from every direction. Finally, the tunnel opens up into a massive, cavernous underground chamber, and the visual here is just haunting. Standing in the center of this massive space are dozens of children.
And these are the missing children from across the decades.
Exactly. Some of them are wearing modern clothes like little Mihal. Others are wearing faded, dusty outfits from the 1980s, the 1960s, even the 1940s. None of them have aged a single day since they were taken. Their skin is completely pale, their expressions are utterly blank, and their eyes have turned entirely black. As Ananya steps into the chamber, every single child turns to look at her simultaneously.
It's a biological assimilation. The children haven't been consumed in a traditional sense. They have been suspended within this subterranean ecosystem. They are acting as nodes in a hive mind. And it is in the center of this chamber, surrounded by the assimilated children, that the entity finally reveals its true physical nature.
Yet this is the moment of unmasking, and it is a masterclass in body horror. The creature slowly reaches up with his pale hands and grips the edges of the cracked red mask. As it peels the mask away, we realize the horror isn't what the face looks like. The horror is that there is no face at all.
The mask was covering a hollow void.
It's not even a skull. Underneath the mask is a dark, recessed cavity, and boiling inside that cavity are thousands of tiny, writhing, insect-like bodies, spiders, worms, and nameless segmented things, all crawling over each other in a frantic, churning mass. The only thing keeping them from spilling out is a thin, translucent membrane stretched across the front of the hollow space.
What's fascinating here is that this perfectly validates your earlier theory about the pressurized suit. The mask was never a disguise. It was a literal containment vessel. Those hairline cracks on the red surface, they weren't from age, they were stress fractures.
Okay.
That was the physical pressure of thousands of parasitic entities constantly pushing against their confinement, trying to burst out.
The source text even mentions that as Ananya watches in horror, a few of these segmented creatures slip through a tear in the membrane, writhe down the collar of the black coat, and then burrow back inside. It's violently repulsive. The performer isn't a man at all. It's an insectoid hive mind operating a humanoid suit to interact with the surface world. And while Ananya is processing this, all the children in the cavern speak in absolute unison, one overlapping voice. They say, "He feeds."
And that single phrase radically recontextualizes the entire threat. The entity in the red mask reacts to the children's voices. It twitches, and its watery voice responds, "The children open the door." When Ananya, terrified, asks what door they are talking about, the creature simply points to the floor of the cavern.
Carved deeply into the stone beneath the children's feet is a massive version of the symbol, the circle with the three intersecting lines. But right at the center of that carving is a jagged, pitch-black hole that drops endlessly into the earth. And from deep down inside that hole, Ananya can hear something moving, something impossibly huge, scraping against stone, breathing, waiting in the dark.
The implications are staggering. We are looking at a symbiotic biological relationship. The entity in the red mask is not the apex predator. It is merely a gatherer, a specialized mobile appendage of something much older and infinitely larger.
Just a worker bee.
Exactly. The children smile with their black eyes and whisper, "He brings them below." The performer's entire biological purpose is to collect innocence from the surface and bring it down to feed the massive breathing organism trapped or residing at the bottom of that deep hole.
It makes you feel completely insignificant. The scale of the threat is beyond human comprehension. But the realization of what this creature actually is seems to trigger a catastrophic failure in its camouflage. The containment vessel fails, the red mask begins to violently crack open, and the mass of insects inside starts pushing outward, bursting through the membrane. Ananya knows instantly that if she stays, she will be assimilated.
The flight sequence that follows strips away any lingering illusion of humanity. Once the pretense is dropped, the entity doesn't run like a person. The text describes its limbs snapping and cracking against the tunnel walls, pursuing her with the jagged, hyper-fast movements of a spider, accompanied by the deafening chittering sound of thousands of insects.
It is pure adrenaline and panic. Ananya sprints back through the brick tunnels, finds the ladder beneath the banyan tree, and climbs desperately toward the surface. But just as her hand grabs the edge of the rusted hatch, a pale hand clamps down on her ankle. She looks down into the dark, and it's one of the missing children.
Oh, man.
The child is smiling up at her with those black eyes and whispers, "You saw him. He won't let you leave." Ananya violently kicks the child away, scrambles out onto the dirt, slams the heavy hatch shut, and runs into the village without ever looking back.
She survives, but the epilogue of the source text introduces a final, baffling defense mechanism of this anomaly. Because when Ananya returns to the village square the next morning with the police, in broad daylight, the landscape has fundamentally changed. The old banyan tree is completely gone, the metal hatch is gone, the dirt is completely flat and undisturbed.
It's as if reality itself just smoothed over the glitch. The environment erased the anomaly to protect its own structural integrity. It leaves Ananya with zero physical proof. And true to the pattern, the performer never appears in Chandrapur again. The authorities write her off as traumatized and hysterical.
But the absence of proof doesn't mean the absence of the threat. The text notes that the vanishings didn't stop, they just migrated. The silent performer simply relocated his hunting ground.
Which forces us to ask why a narrative like this burrows so deeply under our skin. I think it's because it weaponizes our everyday environment. It makes you acutely aware of the literal ground you are walking on. Underneath almost every major city or town, there are miles of forgotten storm drains, sealed basements, and abandoned transit tunnels. We live our entire lives suspended over these dark voids, completely oblivious to what might have moved into the dark generations ago.
And we are equally vulnerable to the psychological aspect of the threat. The entity doesn't just spread physically, it spreads medically. The text concludes by noting that in other villages, years later, children will still randomly start drawing that symbol in the dirt, usually after complaining about nightmares featuring a man with a cracked red face.
The idea acts like a virus, infecting the subconscious of the vulnerable. And that leaves us with a truly chilling final question to mull over. The children in that underground cavern specifically told Ananya that children opened the door. It implies that the symbol isn't just a spooky drawing. It operates as an actual mechanism, a catalyst that physically weakens the boundary between our world on the surface and whatever massive hungry thing is waiting down in that deep hole. So the next time you're sitting in your living room and a child in your neighborhood, or maybe even in your own home, innocently picks up a crayon and starts doodling a circle with three intersecting lines, you have to wonder, what door did